the dishes already? My timer? All right. Lucretia Smith's Soldier by Mark Twain. On a balmy May morning in 1861, the village of Bloomass, Massachusetts, lay wrapped in the splendor of the newly risen sun. Reginald de Whittaker, confidential and only clerk in the house of Bushrod and Ferguson, rose from his bunk beneath the counter and shook himself. After yawning and stretching comfortably for a moment, he sprinkled the floor and began to sweep it. He'd only half finished his task, however, when he sat down upon a keg of nails and fell into a reverie. This is my last night inside this shanty. How surprised Lucretia will be when she hears that I am going to be a soldier. How proud she will be, the little darling. He imagined himself in all types of warlike situations, the hero of 1,000 extraordinary adventures. And finally, returning home, a bronzed and scarred brigadier general, to cast his honors and his maturity and perfect love at the feet of his own Lucretia, born Leah Smith. So, at 8 o'clock that evening, with a heart palpitating with the joyous news he brought for his beloved, Reginald sat in Mr. Smith's parlor, awaiting Lucretia's appearance. The moment she entered, he sprang to his feet, his face lighted with the torch of love that was blazing somewhere in his head and was shining through, and ejaculated, "Mine own!" and opened his arms to receive her. "Sir!" she said, with the bearing of an offended queen. Poor Reginald was stricken dumb with astonishment. This chilling demeanor, this angry rebuff, where he expected the old tender welcome. He stood, dumbfounded for a moment, with a sense of goneness on him, like one who finds himself cast overboard upon a midnight sea, and beholds the ship passing away into shrouding gloom, while the dreadful conviction falls upon his soul that he has not been missed. He tried to speak, but his pallid lips refused their office. Finally, he murmured, "Oh, Lucretia, what have I done? What's the matter? Why this cruel coldness? Don't you love Reginald anymore?" Her lips twisted in bitter scorn, and she replied in mocking tones, "Don't I love my Reginald anymore? No, I don't love my Reginald anymore. So why don't you go back to your pitiful little junk shop, and why don't you take up your pitiful little yardstick, and why don't you stuff cotton in your ears so you don't hear your country calling for you to step in and shoulder arms? Go." And with that, unheeding the new light that flashed from his eyes, she fled the room and slammed the door behind her. Only a single moment more. Only a single moment more, he thought to himself, and he could have told her that he'd already answered the summons and signed his name to the muster roll, and all would have been well. His lost bride would have returned to his arms with words of praise and thanksgiving upon her lips. He marched from that place with martial firmness and never looked behind him. When Lucretia awoke the next morning, the faint music of fife and the roll of a distant drum wafted into her on the soft spring breeze. And as she listened, the sounds grew more subdued and finally passed out of hearing. She lay absorbed in thought for many moments, but finally she murmured, "If only you were among that band of fellows, how I could love him." During the course of the afternoon, a neighbor dropped in, and when the conversation turned upon the soldiers, the visitor remarked, "Reginald Whittaker looked rather downhearted and didn't shout when he marched along with the other fellows this morning. I suspect that's going owing to you, Miss Lou. But when I met him coming here yesterday to tell you he'd enlisted, he thought sure you'd like it and be proud of. Mercy! What the deuce is the matter with you, girl?" "Nothing," Only a sudden misery had fallen like a blight upon her heart, and a deathly pallor had telegraphed itself to her countenance. Bitterly she upbraided herself for her haste of the night before and her harsh treatment of her lover at the very moment that he had come to anticipate the proudest wish of her heart and to tell her that he'd enlisted as her soldier. Alas! Other maidens would have soldiers among those vast armies and would be entitled to feeling a tender solicitude for them, but she would be unrepresented. No soldier in those vast armies would breathe her name when he crested the crimson tide of war. The words were in her bosom, but she kept them there and locked her lips upon their utterance. For weeks she nursed her grief in silence, while the roses faded from her cheeks, and through it all she clung to one hope, that the old love would bloom again in Reginald's heart, and that he would write to her. But the long summer days passed wearily along, and still no letter came. Letters to the other girls sometimes contained brief mentions of him, but painted always the same picture. A morose, desperate, unsmiling man, always in the thickest of the fight, begrimed with powder, passing through shot and shell, but always unharmed, as if he bore a charmed life. And finally, the long list of the maimed and killed, Lucretia read these terrible words while fainting on the floor. R.D. Whitaker, private soldier, desperately wounded. The hospital where one of the hospitals in Washington lay a poor wounded soldier. His face was so profusely bandaged that his features were not visible, but there was no mistaking the happy face of the young girl who sat beside him. It was our Lucretia B. Smith. At the opening of this chapter, Lucretia was in a tumult of happy excitement, for the doctor had just told her that her Whitaker was healthy enough to permit the removal of his bandages, and very soon those love features would be revealed again to her view. One bandage was removed, then another, and lo, the poor wounded face was revealed again to the light of day. Oh, my daughter. Alas, it was the face of a stranger. Confound my cats. If I haven't gone away and wasted a whole mortal summer blottering and slubbering over the wrong soldier. It was the sad, sad truth. The poor unwitting imposter was R.D. or Richard Dilworthy Whitaker of Madison, Wisconsin, the soldier of little Eugene LeMulligan, and utterly unknown to our Lucretia B. Smith. But such is life, and the tail of the serpent hangs over us all. Let's close the curtain on this melancholy tale, for melancholy it must remain, for a season at least. For the real Reginald de Whitaker has not turned up yet. Thank you very much.